Scales of value conversations are remarkably commonplace amongst gear hobbyists. If I spend this much on this piece of gear, is my experience going to be this much better? These kind of pragmatic questions are for anyone who's investing their time and energy and money into a hobby. But they also serve a role in helping people who are new to a hobby become more aware of the different levels of products that are out there, and also serve to deconstruct market propaganda, which inevitably influence our behavior as consumers. But what I think is most of all at the heart of these kinds of questions is personal value. Are the more expensive, more refined attributes of a purportedly better product going to contribute to our enjoyment of these products and our fulfillment and our use and ownership of them? At any rate, an objective comparison between gear pieces has a place alongside the equally enjoyable conversation about the subjective, personal, or artistic value that these things are also going to have. So in this video, I'm going to take two watches of very similar design and not just talk about what differences exist between the two of them, but also whether those differences matter, and if they do, why they matter. Breaking down the elements of these two watches helps us take a step back to take a look at the whole, to see if there's really any meaningful difference between a $30 watch and a $300 watch. Now, since I've done full reviews of both of these watches in detail, please check out the annotations in the video as well as in my description for specifications. Otherwise, I'm going to be bringing up those specifications just in the context of my discussion of these watches. Up to bat first is the Hamilton Kaki Field Mechanical. Now, the reason why I like this watch so much is because of the extremely tidy integration of all of the design elements in the dial. Notice how carefully integrated both the hour Arabics, the military Arabics, and the second Arabics are all together with the use of carefully and tidily printed indices. Also, the dial calling cards, the branding is very minimalistic, is very clean. All of this is hidden under an elegant double dome sapphire crystal. Now, sapphire crystals are a thoroughly modern material, which is one of the hardest synthetic substances that we can make. It actually has a Mohs scale of 9, and so it's going to resist most scratching. The downside of a double dome sapphire crystal is that it is highly reflective unless a coating is applied, and also it is more likely to shatter in the event of being struck in a way that would compromise its structural integrity. Now, the Timex Expedition Scout also has effective dial design, if not quite as neat and tidy and as crisp as the Hamilton style. We start off with a simple seconds track at the border of the dial, and then large rounded printed Arabics, which are very pretty and yet not exactly precise, followed by military time and simple branding on the inner portions of the dial. It all works together for something that's very neat, if not maybe as visually interesting as the Hamilton, and certainly not printed with the precision either. You'll also notice that it has a flat mineral crystal, which is simply a type of hardened glass. Now, this is less prone to shatter, perhaps, than a sapphire crystal, but it is more prone to scratch, which is the more likely damage these watches are going to suffer over time. Now, beyond the dials themselves, we also have the hand design, and these two are remarkably similar, with sword hands with an extended pointed tip. Now, the Timex has the more stylized painted arrow seconds hand, whereas the Hamilton has a more conservative pointer hand. And frankly, I think that the Hamilton's hands work better with this style of field watch. And this is a little bit harder for me to demonstrate given the quality of video that I have, but one thing that's definitely true in real life is that the chrome plating on the Hamilton's hands show a lot more precision and neatness than the Timex. In fact, you might be able to see that the borders of the Timex's hour hand actually are kind of rough looking. Now, credit has to be given to Timex for even considering doing some kind of polished hands on a watch of this price range. But again, if we're going to look at it objectively, the level of finishing on the Hamilton is on another level. Now, in keeping with the field watch design tradition, both of these watches have a fair amount of design specifications on the back that we can learn from. So first of all, we can notice that one of these watches simply has a stainless steel back. The rest of the case is not stainless steel. The other one has a full stainless steel case. We'll also notice that one of the case backs is held onto the case via small screws. The other is simply snapped on. One very important detail the backs teach us is the movement these watches have. And the Hamilton has the ETA 2804. Now this is the base movement of the 2824 and has been around since the early 80s. Now, with the walk and talk of a movement, it's all about the interaction of the hand with the crown. How does this watch feel when you are trying to, for example, change the date? Generally, it feels somewhat thick, for lack of a better way of putting it, and precise. The clicks are simple and mechanical. Changing from setting to setting in the crown is straightforward, and going from changing minutes to changing the date is also extremely simple. Adjusting the time is also straightforward. It can be done in either direction, and it again feels sort of thick, sort of chunky. Now the crown itself is fairly toothy, but not large by any means. And the crown is really the most tactily important aspect of the whole watch, except for maybe the back, because this is the part that you're going to be manually winding every couple days to ensure that the power reserve of this watch is kept up. Again, this is a mechanical watch, not an automatic. This does bring us to a broader conversation about the use of mechanical movements in watches versus quartz. And I'm not going to try to get too much into it because that could be a whole separate video. But in short, let's just say you're looking at a stock movement, the 2804 movement that's in this Hamilton. It's a very common Swiss movement. It's not highly finished. It's not beautiful, so that's not a reason to own this movement. There are reasons to own it are two. First of all, sustainability. This mechanical movement can be maintained and repaired, and that counts for something in a disposable world. Secondly, personal interaction. This is a movement that you are in control. Again, our autonomy from objects is something we often take for granted, but to be able to actually have something you're in control of is very meaningful, in my opinion. So the ability to hand wind it was not just a heritage feature that I wanted, but also something that got to the subjective experience of owning a mechanical watch. Is the Swiss-made specification meaningful? Well, yes and no. So first of all, a Swiss movement is defined as one that was assembled in Switzerland, and the parts constitute 50% more of the movement's total value. Now, a Swiss watch is one with a Swiss case, a Swiss movement, and assembled by a Swiss manufacturer. So this Hamilton is tapping into a long-standing tradition of high levels of craftsmanship as found in Switzerland, which is a little odd considering that this was originally a North American company and is now owned by a conglomerate. Now, in the quartz movement Timex Expedition Scout, we find an even larger crown, and we find that adjusting the time is problematic, even in spite of the fact that it's quartz. The cheap quartz movement, which I go into detail on in the Scout review, has some serious imprecisions. Notice that even though I am attempting to change the date wheel is kind of popping. It's not really effectively changing the date. This is a defective movement, and really the only solution to this problem would be returning the watch, which is really unfortunate. Just that you'd have to start over again. There's not really an easy repair. It's just a bad example. I wanted to show this to you because you're not going to find this on a higher level Swiss watch. You're not going to get something that straight away has a fundamental problem with the movement. The quality control is just going to be at another level. Now, the large stout crown is very comfortable in the hand. It does dig into the wrist a little bit, and it's also the kind of thing that even though it's larger, it isn't necessarily more comfortable to use. It's just more impressive in appearance, maybe. The sense of feeling in the crown is definitely not any better. You know, crowns are often compared to one another in size and design and robustness, but the real telling point of a crown is the crown stem. This is something that a lot of reviewers miss. If the crown stem is stout and confidence-inspiring, then you're going to want to adjust the time in the most carefree way as possible, which I think is what you're looking for when you're dealing with any kind of crowned watch. And so in the Hamilton, you have a much more robust and stout crown design, and I think that that's a significant design point that is due to the result of a robust Swiss movement with a carefully integrated crown. Now, you may have noticed with the crown that the level of machining is not equal amongst these watches, and this is even true with the extremely simple case design. One thing that you'll notice with the Hamilton is that all of the edges are sharp and consistent. So all of the lugs look identical. They're all finished very evenly. The bead blasted case is certainly not my preferred style compared to a brush style of case, but it's better and nicer looking than the pseudo brush case that exists on this brass case Timex. Now, kudos to Timex for trying to make this watch look more expensive, but honestly, I think just going with a stainless steel case and raising the price would have been a better way to go. As you can see, Timex can brush nicely. This is a radial brush case back, but the inconsistently finished actual case is kind of weak. Notice how those back sides of those lugs are polished. Another example of the Timex not really acting its size is how thick it is. Compared to the Hamilton, it is remarkably thicker. And considering that it's significantly lighter than the Hamilton, it's sort of disorienting in real life. There's no reason for this. In the Timex video, I take the case back off the watch, and you see that this Expedition has just a very simple plastic quartz movement and a large movement spacer. You know, one sign of a small movement in a large watch is the position of the date wheel, and so you can see, relatively speaking, that's true of the Hamilton as well. Well, it's true probably at the end of the day that both of these movements were designed for watches smaller than the watches that they're presently encased in. At least the designers on these watches did a good job of integrating the date wheel and put proportionately large hands on the dial, given the relative size of those things to the movement. Straps are another place where the quality level is just not the same. You do get a stainless steel buckle on the Timex and a nicely designed canvas strap, but it is stiff and thin, and there are places where the string is already starting to fray right out of the box. Now with the Hamilton, you do get a strap that's made in Germany for Hamilton. It's branded by Hamilton. As you can see, it's gotten pretty dirty, so you can see a lot of the markings on the inside of the strap. This is a structured strap, which means that it's stitched together with a number of pieces of leather, probably with some kind of liner. Not the highest kind of strap in terms of quality or construction style. But definitely a handsome looking strap, and one that breaks in very nicely. You also have this polished butterfly clasp, which is something you're just not going to find on an entry-level watch. Just a very clean and effective way to keep the watch on your wrist. You can see that there's fine brushing and polishing on this clasp that has gotten marred significantly by the fact that I'm wearing it all the time. And I can assure you that it was very pretty when it came, and the thing that's nice about it is that it will be able to be restored to a polish and to a brush finish if I so choose to bring it to that. You also notice that the style of the butterfly clasp has a great curvature along the wrists, and the Hamilton is a watch to be worn most of all. That's what's so quintessential about the field watch design. These were meant to be worn day in and day out by soldiers, and they better be comfortable. The Expedition is also equally comfortable with its extremely lightweight. It's basically plastic movement, and it's simple, basic design. There's not really any frills. It does tend to flop around a little bit more, but that's largely a function of the thinner strap. But compared to like a large dive watch or a chronograph, both of these watches are so comfortable to wear. Both of them feature decent lume at night. You've just got C3 Superluminova on the Hamilton and some kind of painted lume on the hands on the Timex, but you also have the all-important indigo function, which is excellent for use at night. Both of these watches are fine for use at night in terms of practical terms, but definitely the electroluminescence in the Timex is a remarkable piece of technology regardless of the price. Alright, well, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Please consider subscribing. I would love to have you as a subscriber. Now, one last talking point that I want to cover, and it might be the most important talking point, is that of historical lineage or design provenance. And what I'm talking about here is the fact that the Hamilton Khaki field has its roots in an actual issued watch that was utilized by soldiers in a number of armed conflicts. Now, this historical narrative is important to collectors because the broader human context is one of the reasons why we collect things and why we find significance in things. It's why we like the moon watch, or we like a watch that Steve McQueen wore when he was in that car movie or whatever. It's one of those things that's intangible and yet meaningful. And the Hamilton Khaki field has a real story behind it. Now, as I outlined in my Timex Expedition Scout video, there isn't quite the same story, at least not the same direct lineage in this watch as there is in the Hamilton. And so that might be a strike against it in terms of a broader reason to be interested in this watch as a collector. Now, this is not to fault this watch in its own right, because both from a design perspective and from a wearability perspective, this watch is an outstanding choice at any price range. It's very comfortable and it's very easy to read and use. It also features an excellent electroluminescence in the Indiglow. So where does this lead us at the end of the day? Well, on the one hand, there's no doubt that the manufacturing standards on the Hamilton exhibit a higher level of refinement pretty much consistently throughout the execution of the watch. In general, the design of the Timex is equal, though, from a practicality standpoint. You can wear both of these watches comfortably and with reliable accuracy, respectively, and they're also very readable. I think the real difference starts to come when you start looking at this from a broader human perspective, both in terms of the story of provenance as well as the subjective human interaction that you're going to have with a mechanical watch. I hope you enjoyed this discussion. I'll certainly enjoy any contributions or comments you might have below. Please do me a favor and like and share this video. And please consider subscribing if you're not already a subscriber to check out my other videos on a regular basis. Thanks again.